The wind moved through the canyon like an old spirit carrying warnings from one mountain to another among the red stone Apache. There were two warriors whose names were spoken with equal respect, Tahu and Kalen. They were not brothers by blood, but every heart in the camp believed they were closer than brothers. They had grown up together. They had learned to ride together, had faced hunger storms, enemies, and death together. When one drew his bow, the other already knew where the arrow would fly. When one entered danger, the other followed without question. Tahu was fierce and silent, a tall warrior with strong shoulders, dark, watchful eyes, and a heart that burned like hidden fire. He rarely spoke more than necessary, but every word carried weight. Kalen was different. He smiled more easily and moved with the confidence of a man who trusted both his strength and his destiny, was brave, proud, generous, and loved by the young warriors who followed him. Together they had protected the camp. For many seasons no enemy had ever broken through the canyon while Tahu and Kalen stood guard. But even the strongest friendship can be tested by the one thing no warrior can command: love. Kalen had a younger sister named Sani. She was known throughout the valley for her beauty, but those who truly knew her respected something deeper than her face. Sani had a sharp mind, a brave spirit, and a voice that could calm anger before it became violence. She was not a woman who waited quietly while men decided her path. She watched the world with clear eyes and made her own choice. Tahu had known Sani since childhood. He remembered when she followed the boys to the river, carrying a small wooden spear and demanding to be included in their games. He remembered when she laughed at him because he fell from a horse during training. He remembered the day her mother died and she stood beside Kalen with tears on her face, but refused to collapse somewhere. Through the years, the child he had protected had become a woman he could not stop thinking about. At first Tahu fought against it. She was Kalen's sister of the man who trusted him more than anyone alive. To love her felt dangerous. To speak of that love felt impossible. So Tahu buried his feelings beneath duty. He trained harder. He rode farther. He avoided Sani's eyes whenever she passed near the fire. But Sani was not blind. She saw the way his silence changed around Hirsch. He noticed how his hands grew still whenever she spoke. He understood long before he admitted it to himself. One evening after the hunters returned, Sani found Tahu near the edge of the canyon. The sun was sinking behind the red cliffs. His bow rested beside him. His face was turned toward the distance as if he could escape his own heart by staring far enough into the horizon. "You have been avoiding me," she said. Tahu did not answer at once. "I have been busy," he replied. Sani stepped closer. "You are a terrible liar for such a great warrior." For the first time that day, Tahu almost smiled. Then his face grew serious again. "You should not be here alone with me." "Why not?" "Because Kalen is my brother in all but blood, and you are his sister." Sani looked at him without fear. "I am also myself." Words struck him harder than any weapon. Tahu turned to her. "The world is not so simple." Sani's voice softened. "No, but the heart is sometimes braver than the world." For a long moment they stood in silence while the last light of day touched the canyon walls. Then Sani reached for his hand. Tahu should have stepped away. He knew he should have, but he did not. Their fingers touched, and in that small, forbidden moment, everything changed. Neither of them saw the young scout standing far behind the rocks. Neither of them knew that by sunrise, the whole camp would whisper, and neither of them imagined that Kalen would hear the truth from another mouth before hearing it from the friend he loved like a brother. That night the canyon slept beneath a peaceful sky, but inside the heart of the Redstone Apache a storm had already begun. The next morning the camp woke earlier than usual. Hunters prepared their horses. Women gathered around the cooking fires. Children ran between the lodges laughing, without knowing that something had already changed. The young scout who had seen Tahu and Sani together could not keep the secret. He whispered it to one friend. That friend whispered it to another. Before the sun reached the middle of the sky, almost everyone had heard the story. Only one man still knew nothing. He returned from a hunting trip, carrying a large deer across his horse. The warriors welcomed him with smiles. The smiles disappeared whenever he looked directly at them. He noticed the strange silence. Immediately, "What happened while I was away?" Asked. No one answered. The old chief watched from a distance, hoping the truth would come from Tahu instead of rumors. But fate had chosen another path. One of the younger warriors finally spoke. "Brother, I wish this were only gossip people say they saw. Tahu with Sani beside the canyon last night." Kalen stopped walking. His expression did not change, simply looked at the warrior who had spoken. What exactly did they see? They were holding hands. They looked at each other like two people in love. Silence covered the camp. Kalen said nothing more. He walked straight toward Tahu. Entire village followed with anxious eyes. Tahu was repairing a saddle when he saw Kalen approaching. He immediately understood. Someone told you Kalen stood only a few steps away. It true. Tahu looked directly into his friend's eyes. Yes, Kalen waited for more, but Tahu remained silent. "You could fight beside me for 20 years, said Kalen. You could trust me with your life, but you could not trust me with the truth about my own sister. I wanted to tell you when tomorrow next moon, or after she became your wife." Every word cut deeper than an arrow. Sani hurried toward them before the argument became worse. "Stop this," she said. "No one has done anything dishonorable. I chose to be with him." Kalen turned toward his sister. "Did he ask for my blessing?" Sani answered without fear. "I do not belong to anyone, not even to you." Those words struck Kalen harder than he expected. He loved his sister more than anything. He had promised their dying mother that he would always protect her. Now it felt as if he had failed. His anger was no longer only toward Tahu, it was toward himself. Without another word, Kalen removed the friendship necklace he had worn since childhood. It had been carved from the same piece of wood as Tahu's necklace many years earlier. He threw it onto the ground between them. "From this day forward, we are warriors of the same tribe, nothing more." He turned away without looking back. The sound of the necklace hitting the earth echoed through the silent camp. Tahu slowly picked it up. He held it tightly in his hand, but did not call after Kalen because he knew his friend was too hurt to listen. That evening, the old chief gathered the council. Tribe could not afford division. Dangerous bands of raiders had been seen near the northern hills. The camp needed both of its greatest warriors, but for the first time in many years, Tahu and Kalen refused to stand beside each other. Far away beyond the mountains, a group of ruthless raiders watched. Smoke rising from the Apache Valley. Their leader smiled. If the stories are true, the two lions are no longer hunting together, then this is the perfect time to attack. Hunters still rode into the mountains. Children still laughed beside the river. But something had disappeared, the trust that had united everyone. Tahu and Kalen no longer spoke. When one walked through the camp, the other chose a different path. The younger warriors noticed everything. Some followed Tahu, others remained loyal to Kalen. Old Chief watched with growing concern. He knew that enemies always appeared when a family forgot how to stand together. Sani suffered more than anyone. She loved Tahu with all her heart. She loved her brother just as deeply. Every day she hoped one of them would take the first step toward peace. Neither one did. Several days later, a group of hunters returned with terrible news. A large band of raiders had crossed the northern river. They had already destroyed 2 small settlements, burned their food, stolen their horses, and taken several families captive. The council gathered. Immediately every warrior was called to the central fire. The old chief stood before them. "The raiders will come here next. We must prepare." He turned toward Tahu. "You will defend the eastern canyon." Then he looked at Kalen. "You will guard the western pass." Normally, the 2 greatest warriors would have fought side by side. Now they would defend opposite sides of the valley. That night, scouts climbed every hill around the camp. Just Before sunrise, one of them returned at full speed. "They are here," he shouted. "More than 60 riders. They will reach the valley before sunset." The camp became a storm of movement. Women carried supplies into hidden caves. Elders protected the children. The warriors prepared their bows and spears. Sani walked toward Tahu. "Promise me something," she said. "Anything. No matter what happens, please do not let my brother die because of your anger." Tahu looked at her with sadness. "I have never hated." Kalen, not even for one heartbeat, before Sani could answer, another warrior called for Tahu's eastern scouts. Had spotted movement at the same moment. Kalen climbed the western ridge. From there he could already see dust rising across the plains. The raiders were separating into two groups. His heart sank immediately. This was no ordinary attack. They knew exactly how to divide the Apache warriors. The enemy leader raised his hand. Half of the riders charged toward the eastern canyon. Rest turned toward the western pass. The old chief realized the truth too late. They want Tahu and Kalen separated. If they cannot fight together, the valley will fall. As the first arrows flew across the sky, Tahu defended the eastern entrance with incredible skill. No enemy could pass him far away. Kalen was doing exactly the same. Each warrior was winning his own battle, but neither knew that the other was slowly being surrounded. Then a young scout rode desperately between the two fronts. He reached Tahu first. His horse was exhausted, his face covered with dust. "Kalen is trapped," he shouted. "The western pass is collapsing. There are too many enemies." For one brief moment, Tahu closed his eyes. The camp depended on the eastern defense. If he left, the raiders might break through. If he stayed, his best friend might die. Without another second of hesitation, Tahu mounted his horse and galloped toward the western pass. Tahu rode across the valley faster than anyone had ever seen. Dust rose behind his horse like a storm. Several young warriors shouted for him to return. The eastern canyon was still under attack, but Tahu never slowed down. He had already made his choice. A true brother was worth more than any victory. He reached the western pass. The battle was fierce. Kalen and his warriors were surrounded on every side. Raiders had forced them against the rocks. Every path of escape was blocked. Kalen fought with unbelievable courage. His bow was empty. His spear was broken. Now he defended himself with only a knife. Even so, no enemy dared approach him alone. The raider chief laughed from a distance. "Soon the great Apache hero will fall." At that exact moment, an arrow flew through the air. It struck the weapon from the chief's hand. Every warrior turned toward the ridge. There stood Tahu's bow was already holding another arrow. "Leave him alone," he shouted, "or face me instead." Kalen looked up in disbelief. For a heartbeat, the battlefield became silent. The raider chief smiled. "Perfect. Now both lions stand in the same trap." He raised his arm. More raiders rushed forward from behind the rocks. They had expected Tahu to come. This had been their plan. From the beginning, Tahu reached Kalen's side. Back to back, they stood exactly as they had done countless times during their younger years. Neither spoke. They did not need words. Their movements were enough. When Tahu stepped left, Kalen moved right. When Kalen blocked an attack, Tahu answered with another. It was as if the years of friendship had never disappeared. The younger Apache warriors watched in amazement. They had never seen two men fight with such perfect unity. Little by little, the raiders began losing ground. Their surprise attack was failing. The chief grew furious. "Capture the sister alive," he shouted. "She is the only way to break them." Hidden behind the battle, a small group of raiders had already slipped toward the Apache camp. No warrior noticed them. Everyone was focused on the fighting in the pass back in the village. Sani was helping the elders move the children into the caves. Suddenly, one of the dogs began barking wildly. Old woman looked toward the trees. Horsemen, before anyone could react, 6 raiders burst into the camp. Panic spread immediately. Women grabbed the children and ran. Sani picked up a bow without hesitation. She fired one arrow. Then another 2 raiders fell from their horses. but the others continued advancing. There. Leader pointed directly at her. Take her alive. She is worth more than all the gold in these mountains far away. Tahu suddenly heard the sound of a warning horn coming from the villages. Face changed instantly. Only one thing could make the elders sound. That horn, the camp itself, was under attack. He turned toward Kalen for the first time since their friendship had been broken. Their eyes met without anger, only concern, only determination. Without saying a single word, they both started running toward the valley because nothing mattered anymore except saving the people they loved. Several peaceful days passed across the valley. The lodges damaged during the attack were rebuilt. The horses returned to the open fields. Children laughed beside the river. Once again life slowly became normal. Tahu and Kalen trained together every morning, just as they had done since they were boys. The younger warriors smiled every time they saw them. It was as if the tribe could finally breathe again. One afternoon, the old chief called everyone to the central fire. The danger has passed, he said. It is time for joy to return completely. He looked at Tahu and then at Sani. Our tribe wishes to celebrate your union before the next full moon. Applause echoed through the camp. Sani smiled with tears in her eyes. Tahu bowed respectfully before the elders. It would be the greatest honor of my life. Kalen stepped beside his friend. If my sister has chosen you, then today I choose you as my brother. Before the whole tribe, the warriors cheered louder than ever. That evening the celebration began. Music filled the valley. The elders told stories. The children danced around the fire. For the first time in many years, every heart seemed at peace. But far beyond the mountains, another fire burned. The wounded raider leader had reached the camp of a powerful outlaw named Crow. Crow was feared across the frontier. He cared nothing for honor. He attacked only when victory was certain. The raider leader spoke with anger too. Apache warriors destroyed everything we built. Crow listened without emotion. Then he asked one question. Are they truly as strong as people say? Stronger together, they cannot be defeated. Crow smiled slowly. Then we must make sure they never fight together again. Next morning, a stranger arrived near the Apache Valley, carrying a white cloth as a sign of peace. He claimed to be a trader looking for water. The guards allowed him to rest outside the camp. No one realized he was one of Crow's spies. He quietly counted the warriors. He watched where the horses were kept. He discovered where the children played. Before sunset, he disappeared without leaving a trace. That night, Crow finally had everything he needed. He spread a rough map across the ground. He pointed toward the Apache Valley. We do not attack the warriors first. He said we attack what they love when they abandon their positions to protect their families. We surround them. No mistakes, no mercy. Back in the valley, Sani felt strangely uneasy. She walked outside her lodge and looked toward the dark mountain star, noticed the worry in her eyes. What troubles you? I cannot explain it, she answered, but my heart tells me another storm is coming. Tahu gently held her hands. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Kalen joined them, carrying 3 cups of warm tea. Then I suppose I should stand beside my brother and my sister once again, he said with a smile. The 3 laughed together. None of them knew that dozens of outlaws were already riding through the darkness. Every hoofbeat brought them closer to the valley and closer to the greatest battle the Apache tribe had ever faced. Asterisk. Before sunrise, the Apache scouts heard distant horses. They climbed the highest ridge and looked toward the eastern plains. What they saw made their blood run cold. More than 100 riders were moving toward the valley. Crow had gathered outlaws from many different territories. Some carried rifles, others carried bows and spears. All of them had come for one purpose: to destroy the Apache tribe forever. The warning horn echoed across the mountains. Within moments, every warrior stood ready. Old Chief looked across the camp. Today, we do not fight for glory. We fight for our familia. Sta and Colin stepped forward together. 4. The first time since their friendship had been restored, they stood side by side before the entire tribe. The warriors felt their courage grow. If the two greatest Apache heroes stood together, no one feared the coming Battle Crow. Stopped his army outside the valley. He rode forward alone. You have one chance, he shouted, hand over Tahu Kalen and the woman called Sani Du. That and the rest of you may live, the old chief answered without hesitation. Among the Apache, we never trade the lives of our own people. Crow laughed. Then every one of you will fall today. He raised his hand. The attack began. The valley shook with the sound of galloping horses. Arrows filled the sky. The Apache warriors held their ground. Tahu led the eastern defense. Kalen protected the western ridge. Every attack was answered with discipline and courage. Crow soon realized his first assault had failed. He smiled exactly as planned. Hidden behind the hills, another group of outlaws quietly entered the valley from the south. Their mission was not to fight. Their mission was to kidnap Sani. One young Apache scout spotted them. He raced toward the village as fast as his horse could run. Sani, they are coming for you. Instead of hiding, Sani picked up her bow. I will not spend my life running, she said. The women of the tribe stepped beside her. Some carried bows, others held spears. Even the elderly stood ready to defend their home. The outlaws charged into the camp expecting easy victims. Instead, they found warriors in every direction. Battle spread through the village. Sani fought with remarkable courage. She protected the children while helping the women push the attackers back far away. Tahu suddenly heard another warning horn. Immediately understood the enemy had reached the camp. Without hesitation, he looked at Kalen. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Neither needed to speak. Kalen nodded once. Go. I will hold this. Tahu mounted his horse and rode toward the village with incredible speed. Crow watched him leave and smiled. Now only one brother remains. Finish him. Dozens of outlaws surrounded Kalen from every direction. For the first time that day, bravest Apache warrior stood completely alone, and every outlaw believed this was the moment he would finally fall. Tahu and Kalen raced down the mountain with every warrior who could still stand. The warning horn echoed across the valley again and again. No Apache needed an explanation. Their families were in danger as they reached the camp. Smoke was already rising. Into the sky, several lodges had caught fire. Children were being carried toward the caves by the elders. Women fought beside the warriors with fearless determination. Sani stood in the center of the village, holding a bow. 3 raiders already lay on the ground around her, but more kept coming. The enemy leader pointed directly at her. Take the woman alive. Do not let her escape. 2 raiders rushed forward. Before they reached her, 2 arrows struck the ground in front of their feet. Both men froze. They knew those arrows only one Apache could shoot with such impossible accuracy. Tahu had returned. He jumped from his horse before it stopped moving. His bow worked without pause. Every arrow forced another raider to retreat. Kalen charged from the opposite side with the remaining warriors. Within moments, the raiders found themselves trapped between the 2 greatest fighters in the valley. For the first time since their friendship had broken, Tahu and Kalen fought together again. Neither spoke. They simply protected each other exactly as they always had. An enemy tried to strike Tahu from behind. Kalen stopped him. Another rushed toward Kalen with a spear. Tahu intercepted the attack before it reached his friend. The old chief watched with relief. The brothers had returned little by little. The raiders lost hope. Many abandoned their weapons. Others fled toward the forest. Only their leader continued fighting. He grabbed Sani and held a knife near her neck. Everyone stop, he shouted, or she dies. The entire battlefield fell silent. Tahu slowly lowered his bow. Kalen took one careful step forward. Let her go. Take me instead. Raider laughed. You would give your life for your sister? Without hesitation, Kalen answered yes. Before the man could speak again, Tahu calmly stepped beside his friend, and I would give mine for both of them. The raider looked from one warrior to the other. He could not understand such loyalty. He believed every man fought only for himself. That single moment of hesitation was enough. Sani drove her elbow backward with all her strength. The raider lost his balance. Tahu released one arrow. It struck the man's knife and sent it spinning into the dirt. Kalen rushed forward and pulled his sister to safety. Remaining raiders fled in panic within minutes. The valley became quiet once more. The danger had passed. As the smoke slowly disappeared, the old chief gathered everyone around the central fire. He looked first at Tahu, then at Kalen. Today, neither of you fought for pride. You fought for your people. That is the true heart of an Apache warrior. Kalen remained silent for a long moment. Finally, he turned toward Tahu. You came back from me in the pass. You could have stayed safe. Haida looked at his oldest friend. Because you have always been my brother. No disagreement is worth more than that. Kalen lowered his head for the first time since everything had begun. Anger inside him started to disappear, but one final decision still remained. Decision that would determine whether they would truly become brothers again. Asterisk. That evening, the entire Apache camp gathered around the great fire. The battle was over. The wounded were being cared for. Children were safe. For the first time in many days, peace returned to the valley. But one question still remained in every heart. Would Tahu and Kalen ever become brothers again? Old Chief stood before the tribe. Tonight, we celebrate our survival, he said. But before we celebrate, there is one wound that must be healed. He turned toward Kalen. Your father was one of the wisest warriors this tribe has ever known. What do you believe he would tell you now? Kalen lowered his eyes. He remembered his father teaching him as a child, a warrior who cannot forgive will one day become a prisoner of his own anger. Those words echoed inside his heart. Slowly he walked toward Tahu. The entire camp watched in complete silence. I believed you had betrayed me, he said, not because you loved my sister, but because you hid the truth from Tahu. Nodded. I was wrong. I feared losing my brother. Instead, I almost lost both my brother and the woman I love. Kalen remained silent for several moments. Then he looked toward Sani. Tell me the truth. Have you chosen this man with your own heart? Sani stepped forward without hesitation. Yes. No one forced me. No one persuaded me. Love him because he is honorable, because he protects others before himself, because he has loved me quietly for many years without ever disrespecting you. Kalen smiled for the first time in many weeks. Then perhaps I have been fighting the wrong enemy. He turned back to Tahu. Ken, you forgive a stubborn brother. Tahu laughed softly. Only if you can forgive a foolish one. Without another word, the two warriors embraced. The entire valley erupted in cheers. The younger warriors raised their bows. The women clapped with joy. The elders smiled with relief. Old Chief lifted both hands toward the sky. Tonight, our tribe has become strong again, not because we defeated our enemies, because we defeated our pride. Later that night, Kalen walked beside Tahu beneath the stars. There is something else I must tell you, he said. The raider leader escaped. Our scouts found his tracks heading east. Tahu nodded calmly. He has lost his men. He will never threaten this valley again. Kalen shook his head. Maybe not, but desperate men often make dangerous choices. We should stay ready. Tahu agreed. At that moment, Sani joined them. She looked from one warrior to the other. Finally, my two heroes are speaking again, she said with a smile. Kalen laughed. I suppose I should stop calling him my friend from now on. I should probably call him my brother. Tahu smiled. That would make me proud. The three stood together, watching the moon rise above the mountains. None of them noticed a lone rider observing the valley from a distance. Ridget was the wounded raider leader. His face was filled with hatred. He whispered only one sentence before disappearing into the darkness. Is not over. The happiest day of the Apache camp was about to be tested one final time. Kalen stood alone in the narrow pass. Outlaws surrounded him from every direction. Crow watched from the hill with complete confidence. Warrior can survive this, he said. Kalen tightened his grip on his spear. He remembered the promise he had made to His father protect your people before you protect yourself. First wave attacked Kalin, fought with unmatched courage. Every movement was calm and precise. The narrow pass prevented the outlaws from attacking all at once. One after another, they fell back, but there were simply too many of them. Little by little, Kalin was forced farther toward the cliffs back in the village. Tahu arrived just as several outlaws broke through the southern entrance. He fired arrows without stopping, each shot protected another family. Each step pushed the enemy farther away. Sani fought beside him with fearless determination. Women of the tribe refused to surrender a single child or a single home. Within minutes, the last outlaw inside the village fled into the forest. One young scout ran toward Taukawan, is still alone in the pass. He shouted Crow, sent almost everyone after him. Without waiting another second, Tahu mounted his horse. Ride with me, he called to the warriors. No Apache stands alone more than 30. Warriors followed him across the valley. Meanwhile, Kalin's strength was beginning to fade. His shield was broken. His spear had splintered. A deep wound covered one arm even, so he refused to step back. Crow finally rode forward. You fought well, he said, but every legend ends. Crow raised his rifle. Before he could fire, an arrow struck the weapon from his hands. Crow turned in disbelief. Tahu had arrived. Behind him came dozens of Apache warriors. The valley echoed with their battle cry. Kalin smiled despite his exhaustion. You took your time, brother, Tahu laughed. I knew you would save a few enemies for me for the first time in many years. The two friends laughed in the middle of a battlefield. Then they stood shoulder to shoulder, exactly where they belonged. The outlaws attacked again. This time they faced not one hero but two. Tahu covered Kalin whenever he tired. Kalin protected Tahu whenever danger came from behind. Younger warriors followed their example. The Apache line moved forward together. Crow watched his army lose heart. Every plan had failed. His men were retreating. His victory was slipping away. Filled with rage, he pulled a hidden pistol from beneath his coat. If I cannot defeat them, I will destroy what they love most. Quietly rode away from the battlefield. No one noticed him disappear. No one except an old Apache scout watching from the cliffs. Old Scout's face turned palely, knew exactly where. Crow was going straight toward the village, straight toward Sani. The old scout blew the emergency horn with every breath left in his body. Its sound rolled across the mountain. Stopped fighting for a single moment. He recognized that signal immediately. It meant only one thing: someone was riding toward the camp with murder in his heart. Without saying a word, Tahu and Kalin mounted their horses together. For the last time they raced side by side toward the woman they both loved more than their own lives. Neither of them knew whether they would arrive in time. Te final Baklum. Mutlu son la bidir, Van Seki Balumler Baglanir. The warning horn echoed across the valley without stopping. Every Apache understood its meaning. Someone had broken through the battle. Someone was riding toward the heart of the camp. Tahu and Kalin pushed their horses harder than ever before. Neither man spoke, neither needed words. They had ridden together since they were children. Each one knew exactly what the other was thinking. When they reached the village, they saw Crow forcing his horse through the burning entrance. Several frightened horses ran across. The camp children hurried toward the caves, while the elders tried to keep everyone calm. Sani stood in the center of the square, with her bow already raised. She refused to run. Crow laughed as he approached. Everything that happened today began because of you. Come with me, and your people will live. Sani answered with complete confidence. Coward always blames others for the evil inside his own heart. Crow's smile disappeared. He lifted his rifle before he could fire an arrow, struck the rifle, and shattered the wooden stock. Crow turned immediate. Elia had arrived only a heartbeat later. Kalin stood beside him. The two warriors faced the outlaw together. Crow slowly drew a long knife. You still think you can stop me? Tahu stepped forward. You lost the moment you chose greed Over Honor Crow charged with all his strength. Fight lasted only a few moments. He attacked wildly Tahu, blocked every strike Kalen, closed every escape. The outlaw, who had terrified so many villages, suddenly realized he was trapped. He tried to flee. Tahu kicked the knife from his hand. Kalen caught him before he reached his horse. Within seconds, Crow was on his knees. The entire tribe surrounded them. Silence filled the camp. Crow looked at Tahu with hatred. Finish it, kill me. If you are truly the great Apache everyone admires. Tahu looked toward the old chief, then toward the children watching nearby. Finally, he lowered his weapon. A warrior who kills an unarmed man destroys his own honor. You will leave these mountains alive, but you will never return. Crow could not believe what he had heard. For the second time, an Apache warrior had shown him mercy. The old chief ordered several warriors to escort Crow and the few surviving outlaws beyond the northern river. If any of them ever returned, every tribe in the region would know their names. Crow lowered his head in shame. Without another word, he disappeared beyond the mountains forever. As the sun began to set, the valley became peaceful once again. The old chief called every family to the central fire. Tonight we celebrate more than victory. Today we celebrate unity. He smiled at Tahu, smiled at Kalen, and finally he looked at Sani. The tribe has already witnessed your courage. Now let it witness your happiness. Kalen walked toward his sister. He gently took her hand, then placed it into Tahu's hand. Years ago, I thought I was protecting you by standing between you. Today, I understand something much greater. The greatest protection is trusting the people you love. Tahu looked at his oldest friend. You have been my brother since we were boys. Nothing will ever change that. Two embraced as the entire tribe cheered. A few days later, the whole valley gathered beneath the ancient cedar trees. Flowers covered the ground. Children laughed while the women sang old Apache songs. The elders blessed the union of Tahu and Sani before the entire tribe. When the ceremony ended, Kalen stepped forward, carrying 2 necklaces carved from the same piece of cedar wood many years ago. We promised these necklaces would never be separated. Today, I return yours. He placed one around Tahu's neck. The other remained around his own. The 2 friends smiled, not as warriors, not as heroes, but as brothers. Once again, years passed. The Apache Valley became known throughout the land as the place where courage walked beside forgiveness. Young warriors learned that strength alone could never build peace. Honor, loyalty, and trust were the greatest victories a person could ever earn. Whenever children asked why Tahu and Kalen were remembered by every family, elders always gave the same answer: because they proved that true brothers may lose their way for a while, but if their hearts remain honorable, love will always bring them home. And beneath the endless Apache sky, the 2 brothers, their families, and their people lived many long years in peace, proving that no misunderstanding is stronger than loyalty, and no battle is greater than forgiveness. Asterisk.